All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the forum. We've been bringing together Central Ohioans for nearly 50 years. Actually, 50 years. This is our 50th year of having conversations just like this. The forum brings together visionary leaders, CEOs, members of Congress, college presidents, UN ambassadors, artists, and change makers to examine issues that matter, exchange diverse perspectives, and forge connections that truly create a better Columbus. My name's Sophia Pfiffner. I'm the president and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. And for those of you who are joining us via live stream, welcome. We're broadcasting from the beautiful National Veteran and Memorial Museum here in the heart of downtown Columbus. Let's thank today's sponsor, Columbus City Council, and a huge thank you as well to Downtown Columbus Incorporated for providing complimentary parking. We love free parking, so let's give them a round of applause. We can't hold conversations without a village, so I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and to our live stream and promotional partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We're also grateful to the National Veteran and Memorials Museum for hosting us today. Every CMC takes a village, so let's give all of our partners a huge round of applause. Okay, big breath, right? If you're like me, I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, wow, how are we in the United States in the place that we are today? But today's forward-looking conversation is Haitian refugees and the future of immigration in Central Ohio. Tucked into neighborhoods across Central Ohio are thousands of Haitian refugees and their families who've built lives, businesses, and communities, many under a federal designation called Temporary Protected Status, or TPS. With that protection set to expire February 3rd, their futures hang in the balance. Today, we dive into the shifting terrain of U.S. immigration policy, how it's playing out in real time across Central Ohio, and how it may impact our friends, but most importantly, our neighbors. To introduce today's panelists, please welcome Shannon Hardin, president of today's forum sponsors, Columbus City Council. President Hardin, the podium is yours.
Well, thank you, Sophia, and let's give it up for the CMC for bringing us together one more time as a community. We're so grateful that we can gather as a Columbus community to talk about such a timely and important conversation. And I'm grateful to see so many of our community leaders here that are our advocates, their neighbors, their partners, because as Sophia said, immigration is part of the story of our city. It's shaping our economy, our neighborhoods, our schools, and our shared future. We say this often, but Ohio would not be growing without immigration. That's not a slogan, it's a fact. Across our state and here in our city, immigrants are helping to stabilize population loss. They are filling in workforce shortages. They're starting new businesses at higher rates than the native-born population. They're opening restaurants and small businesses. They are bringing energy, entrepreneurship, and vitality to communities that need it. Haitian migration in recent years has become a part of that story. Many Haitian families came here seeking safety and opportunity, and they arrived ready to work, to contribute, and build lives for their communities. And they're doing exactly that. And I'm reminded, because my colleague, Councilmember Barroso Padilla, reminds me that even if they weren't, just the basic humanity of who we are, and that African proverb, Ubuntu, or that philosophy that I am because you are, says that we must stand up and have this conversation. Building on this landscape last year through the leadership of Councilmember Barroso Padilla, Council formed the Immigrant and Refugee Commission. I think they are here today. Members are here. If you are, thank you so much for your service. It reflects a commitment to furthering the needs of this community and listening to this community. Today's panel brings together voices who understand this issue from multiple angles: policy, law, lived experience, service delivery, storytelling, and I'm grateful for their willingness to share their expertise. So today we are joined by my colleague and friend, Councilmember Lourdes Padilla. She's my colleague and a passionate leader who's been a steadfast advocate for immigrant families and inclusive policy. She brings experience as a first-generation Cuban American and a deep understanding of how local government can and must respond thoughtfully to immigration in our city. Would you help me welcome my colleague, Lourdes Barroso de Padilla. We're also joined by our friend Emily Brown. She's the director of the Immigration Clinic at the Ohio State University of Moritz College of Law, whose work provides critical legal insights into the system shaping immigrant and refugee lives. Would you welcome Ms. Emily Brown? Next, I'm so excited for everyone to hear from Sophia Pierrelus, and the work that she has done. We're just really grateful as a community. But she joins us as an entrepreneur and partner working with Haitian immigrants right here in Columbus. She brings the perspective of a community leader, of civic engagement, and lived experience, grounding this conversation in the realities that Haitian families face and the contributions that they continue to make in our community. Would you please help me welcome Sophia? And someone who I don't know how she's awake right now because of the work that she has been doing over the last several weeks, but obviously several years, Ms. Angie Plummer, who's the Executive Director of Community Refugee and Immigration Services, or CRIS. This organization has long been a cornerstone of refugee and immigrant resettlement in our region, and their work translates values into action each day. We are a safer, better, and more just community because of the work of Chris and Angie. So thank you. Would you help me welcome Ms. Angie? And guiding this conversation is our friend Danae King, Underserved Communities reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Danae reporting consistently centers voices that are far too often marginalized and brings clarity, accountability, and humanity to complex issues. We are grateful to have her as moderator of this conversation. This conversation matters. It's an opportunity to move beyond headlines, to challenge misinformation with facts, and to remind ourselves that immigration is not something that's happening to our city, it's something that is helping to build our city. So thank you all for being here and for engaging in this great conversation. I'm honored to turn the floor over to Ms. Danae King.
Great. Well, that was a fantastic introduction. So let's get started. So we have kind of a good lay of the land of immigrants' impacts locally, but I want to put this into some context. About 30,000 Haitian Americans live here in Columbus and Central Ohio, and another estimated 20,000 live in Springfield, Ohio. So just with that, I'm wondering if one of you would kind of set the scene for us. You know, what does the community, the Haitian community, look like here locally? And do most of them have the status we're talking about, the protection from deportation?
Thank you. Well, Haitians have, a lot of them have their legal status. Let's be clear on that. Because many of them came through the parole program, and when they were here with the program, actually that's legal, and they were able to get the temporary protected status. And another fact that people, they don't know, temporary protected status has been around for a long time, and Haitians has been involved in getting that status before, since the earthquake back in 2010. So we have Haitians that's been living in Columbus, Ohio, or in the United States with the temporary protected status, who's been here for a decade. They build families, they have a career, they contribute to the United States, they pay their taxes, they are professionals, and they have children, US-born children here. So if they ended TPS, I said if because we're fighting, a lot of people are going to be affected, not only the Haitians, but also Columbus, Ohio, because they contribute so much. They work in the warehouse, healthcare, judicial system, you name it. They are homeowners, and also they contribute so much So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Just a few more words about TPS that I think will help give some background so people understand it a little bit better. Like you said, the Haitians that have TPS, some of them are more recently arrived, but some of them have been here for 15 years, right? So this program currently covers over 1 million people nationwide. I think about 1.3 million is the last estimate I heard. And it was, the whole intent behind it is to protect people who are already here in the US, but it's unsafe to go back to their country. And that can be because of an armed conflict that broke out after they left. It can be because of a natural disaster like an earthquake or a hurricane, and it can be because of some other extraordinary political or social upheaval. So obviously for Haiti, initially in 2010, it was the earthquake that triggered the status, and then more recently it's been some of the extraordinary political upheaval and violence that has been taking over the country there. And so it is a humanitarian program. It's meant to protect people who it is unsafe for them to return home. And when the Trump administration announced it was terminating Haiti's TPS status, which it has terminated every single country thus far except one, I believe, it basically gave almost no justification for doing so. And you're required under the law to give reasons why you're terminating it and to consider the current conditions in the country and then explain why it's safe for people to return. And they essentially didn't do that. So like Sophia mentioned, there is litigation challenging the end of TPS, which is scheduled right now to expire on February 3rd. And the litigation may block it, it may not, we don't know yet. But clearly the Trump administration is pursuing an agenda by terminating every single country that it's considered for TPS and deciding that literally all of them are safe to return to.
And I think to add to that, to add just a little bit more in terms of numbers, so 1.3 million people are under TPS status across the country. Ohio is, so there were 17 countries that were under a TPS status as of last year that have had that removed. If you look at Ohio, we are number 13 in terms of the amount of folks under TPS status. So it's upwards of 5 figures that we have across the state of people. So when you think about ending someone's TPS status and saying you're going to go back to, in Haiti's example, a country that since 2010 has not had the infrastructure to rebuild itself, has had mass spread of diseases that we haven't seen in modern times because of the failed infrastructure. When you assassinate a president and then there are gangs, literal street gangs, that now have taken over a country, to say that is safe for someone to go back to after they've been in this country for 15 years, and we're saying we're going to remove 20,000, 100,000, 200,000 people. I mean, you're literally saying, you're going to take away a quarter of the population of Columbus, right? I don't know if you guys are Marvel fans, when there was the blip and people just disappeared. That's essentially what we're talking about. We're talking about a real life blipping of people that can go, have no place to go back to. Because for many folks, and Haitians in particular, they have no land. They have no status. So there is no place to go back to. And so let that sink in when we are talking about removing protections for people. Back to Council President, when you said the humanity of it all doesn't exist in these policies.
I have to make little corrections. Haitians have been suffering from instability for 40 years. Since 1986, when Papa Doc left the country, Haitians have been living in a dire situations. And it's getting worse by the minute because the gangs took over 90% of the capital of Haiti, which is Port-au-Prince. They are kidnapping, they are raping, they are acting for ransom. When you give them the ransom, they still kill you. And people who are here that actually had no choice than to flee Haiti, it's because that they lost everything. The gangs took over their homes, their businesses. There's no education. The school system There's no school system. There's no employment. There is nothing. We have a total of 550,000 Haitians under TPS. Now, where are they gonna go? That's the question.
Thank you. Excuse me. That's an important point too, because the Department of Homeland Security has issued these notices terminating TPS for a number of countries. I think there's 15 on the list. 5 are set to expire this year, and the administration has terminated the other 10. And they're sending them back to conditions that aren't really livable. In Somalia, in Haiti, there's no place for people to go back to. And I also wanted to note that this is something that, this is a status that offers you protection from deportation and work authorization, so they can legally work in this country. They've built lives here, and it's renewed every few years. So the government is constantly looking at this and renewing it, but also recommend that their own citizens don't travel to these countries because it's too dangerous. So this discussion's answered a lot of the questions I had for you all, but I really wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening here with Haitians. When we think about an international move, what does that mean if Haitians, on February 3rd, what happens? And I want you guys to talk a little bit about the monetary cost of an international move, if that's something people are considering, but also the cost of leaving maybe children behind, and families, and jobs, and homes and lives. So tell me a little bit about what happens on February 3rd.
On February 3rd, if the NTPS, many of Haitians will not be able to go to work, which can affect the housing, because how are they going to be paying for their rent and their mortgages? Provide food, putting food on the table for their children. And their children will be dealing with trauma and mental health, even the adults. I spoke with a few families, and some of them told me that, where am I gonna go? I didn't ask to come here. They offered me, they gave me the parole program, and they gave me the temporary protected status. So what do they want me to do today? Because I have no place to go. They took over my home. So some of them, many of them, they don't want to leave United States. Not because they feel like it's my place, I have to be there, but it's because that there's no way they can go back to gangs. They can bring their children to gangs. They can see their daughters being kidnapped and being raped. There's no way they're gonna be able to find a way to provide food on their tables. So the Haitians here, many of them, they are hoping that the legal system can be on their sides to understand that it's impossible to go home, and also depending on our elected officials locally, hopefully can advocate for us, and they are doing that. They've been doing that. And myself, I have hope that very soon we can hear something positive, because it's heartbreaking.
And when we talk about so I want to back up for just a second. When we talk about the economic impact, so when you think about a place like Springfield, Ohio, right? So Columbus is growing, we know that. We know that the number one factor behind our population growth is immigrants and refugees, right? And that's a big impact. We're a larger metropolitan city, but I want to talk about places like Springfield, right? Springfield would see no growth if it wasn't for immigrants. And I want to be clear, immigrants aren't taking things away, they're adding. Because I will tell you, as a member of Columbus City Council, take a neighborhood, any neighborhood, right? Once you start to add more housing, what starts to happen? You see more businesses come. You see infrastructure improvements, right? You see an investment. Why? Because that's where the people are. Even if you take a Walmart, a Kroger, big stores, they're looking at those population numbers because they want to make sure they're in it for the business, right? This is what capitalism does. Capitalism feeds off of who? The people. You showing up to spend your dollars in those stores. And so when you add people, when you have that sort of population growth, it's going to add to the local economy. And we're talking in the billions, right? Because those people pay taxes. They buy property, they pay property taxes that all of us benefit from. They pay into Social Security, right? They are adding to the economy, they're adding jobs. So you can start to see when you extract that, what happens to places like Springfield, Ohio. When again, you do that blip and you start to remove people, you know what happens? A divestment in places like Springfield, Ohio, because it would be harmful to us as a city, but it's even more harmful to Springfield. And when you have an administration that says things like, we need to have more babies. Well, I want to tell you, I have 2 teenagers at home that ask me why. Why should they have babies? When I don't have autonomy over my body, when my identities are attacked every day, when we are not raising the minimum wage, when we are not giving people a living wage, when the cost of childcare, you don't incentivize me with a one-time check because the last time I checked, parenthood is a lifetime proposition. Is it not? How many parents do we have in the room? Make college more affordable. That might incentivize me to have some babies. Give me some universal pre-K. That might incentivize me to have some babies. Okay? Pay me a little bit more. Pay me what I'm worth. That might incentivize me to have some babies. Right? But if I'm not going to do that and someone is saying to me, I can't live where I came from and I choose to be here and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to become a member of this community that all of us are going to benefit from and we're going to shut the door on them, that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't make sense from an economic or from an economic standpoint or from the humanity of it all. It just doesn't make sense. It is a narrative that causes chaos deliberately, and every single one of us pay the price. When there was a narrative around Haitians that our president was putting out, when there was a narrative around Somalians that our president was putting out, what did we see? The closure of schools. We saw the closure of hospitals because there were threats. We saw people not leaving their homes, people literally, children not going to school for fear that they had, even if you were an American citizen who looked like me or who had my name. Because when ICE is pulling you over because they run my plates and they see that my name is Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, they start to ask questions about where I came from and what my status is. Who wants to leave their house? So today we talk about Haitians. Last week we talked about Somalians. We're always talking about Latinos, right? These are your friends and your neighbors. Who loves Taco Tuesday? Who loves Drinko de Mayo? You can't celebrate the culture and not invest in the culture. Your neighbor that you knew for 20 years, you didn't know their status, they were super nice, they baked you a flan or made you some tortillas and you never even thought about their life. But now today it's a problem that they might not have some sort of status that keeps them here legally. It is a narrative that causes confusion. It makes no sense in terms of our economy. It makes no sense in terms of the stability of our communities and the stability of our country. And quite frankly, when you talk about making America great again, how was America built, my friends? By people who were not even of this land, who claimed it, made it theirs, and said it was for all of us. Only if you were a white man who owned land. That was in parentheses. So the conversation that we are having today, we can have it from a dollars and cents point of view. We can have it from a humane point of view, from our humanity. But either way, it's a conversation that makes no sense. It's not a policy that is rooted in us as a people.
Thanks, Councilmember. I think that brings us to a really good point. I want to ask one more question about TPS and Haitians before we move on to kind of the broader immigrant narrative. But, you know, I did a story a couple months ago about Springfield businesses struggling because Haitian Americans stopped working because their status was ending, their work authorization expired back then. And we also saw, you know, on the heels of a well-documented, you know, historical need for food and housing and food pantries really exhausting their stockpiles everywhere. That happened also, there was more demand in Springfield. So we've seen the economic and social fallout from this, but I know we have some lawyers on the panel, so I wanna ask a little bit about, you know, I feel like a common refrain is, you know, well, can they just be here legally? And TPS holders are, but are there other options for staying if you do have TPS? And what are maybe some downsides to those, or are there things right now that make it more complicated if there are pathways to citizenship?
Do you want me to take that? Or I'll go ahead and then you can follow up. So yeah, the short answer to your question, Danae, is yes, there are some limited other pathways available, but none of those are really viable or workable for this large population. When we're talking about 350,000 people, when we're talking about 1.3 million people around the country from all of the different TPS designated countries, our immigration system is not set up for this. And so one option is some people are applying for asylum, and there are Haitians that are doing that right now. There are others from other countries that are doing that have TPS. They know their TPS is going to expire. They're applying for asylum. But our asylum system is already severely overloaded and backlogged. And so that's not really a viable option for this large number of people. Also, asylum has a different legal standard. It's harder to qualify for than TPS. And so many people will lose their asylum claims and then be ordered deported then. And so, you know, we're looking right now at the court, USCIS has over, that's the agency that processes asylum applications. They have over 1 million pending applications, and it's estimated that if you file now, you'll be waiting over a decade to even get an interview. The courts are similarly backlogged, the immigration courts, and so this is only going to worsen that problem and make all asylum seekers unable to ever qualify for relief and get justice. So it doesn't really, although many people will try through these avenues, it's unlikely to be a solution that's going to help a lot of people. And it's being exacerbated by the fact that people may have seen the news in the last month and a half that the president has frozen all asylum applications and is just saying no asylum applications will be adjudicated. Questionable whether that's legal, but that is the policy as of now until it gets challenged. And then also people from certain countries, including Haiti, are having all of their any other type of applications. So some of them might be applying for green cards. There's a few that are eligible for green cards, not many. Some of them might be applying for work authorization, all these things. And those benefits are all being frozen. So it's hard to even look at TPS on its own without seeing it as part of a constellation of the mass deportation machine, which is really what the Trump administration is trying to build right now. And they're attacking TPS, but they're also attacking all of the other pathways by which people might have a way to stay here. And so if people don't have any other way, and like everyone has been saying, they don't have a place to go back to in Haiti, it's not safe for them there, then what happens is people end up working in the informal economy. They get easily exploited. It drives down wages for everybody because there's people that will be able, that you can pay less than the minimum wage and not follow OSHA regulations and all sorts of things, right? And so you just see this cascading effect that is going to affect so much more than just TPS holders.
Okay. I'm gonna, thank you. Yeah, so we've talked about a couple different statuses that immigrants in our community have, and Council President Hardin mentioned that this is the only reason our city is growing is we have a lot of immigrants coming in. And so refugees are another status that we have a lot of people claim locally, a lot of neighbors. So I wanted to ask, and this is for everybody, but the end of TPS for Haitians and Somali people and others is just one example, as I think we've seen, of how the Trump administration has targeted immigrants. There's negative rhetoric and accusations about Somali people, increased ICE enforcement and arrests. I'd love it if some of you could go into some other examples of this administration's actions against immigrants and just how they're impacting, immigrants, but also our communities here locally.
So I've been holding back with an opportunity to give you my red alert. This is the thing that has been keeping me up, as Council President Hardin referenced, and that is Operation Paris, P-A-R-R-I-S, which, sorry, was that me? Post-arrival, I'm sorry, that's post-admission refugee re-verification integrity something. So in November, USCIS put out a memo internally that eventually the media got hold of that said all refugees admitted during the Biden administration would have their cases reviewed. All those people who came who went through decades of waiting, tons of vetting, who had started their new lives here, all of them would have their cases reopened. There was little guidance about how that would be implemented, but what we learned on January the 9th is that in Minnesota, they started rounding up refugees from their houses, people who are here in lawful refugee status who had not yet obtained their green cards, because refugees can't apply for a green card until they've been here for a year. And then it typically takes another year before they get it. So lots of people out there who came who didn't have green cards yet. At least 100 people were picked up in Minnesota. They're targeting Minnesota first. People were taken immediately to Texas, to detention centers. These were mothers, families, people taken to Texas. We don't know a lot about the details of what happened in Texas. Did they get interviewed there? We're still trying to learn exactly what's happened. We know a few people have been released. At least one was let go in Texas with no resources and no documents. So I say all of that as a warning to what could very well play out right here in Columbus. And how that's playing out already is that I got a call from a mom whose daughter came just before everything shut down, before the administration. She doesn't have a green card yet. She's having surgery this week, so she knows she's sitting in the hospital all week and doesn't have a green card and is fearful. Can she even go through with the surgery? We're hearing, word travels fast, so the community here knows exactly what's happened in Minneapolis. That plays out again locally. Somebody we resettled a year ago who was driving Uber is afraid to drive Uber now, had a new job interview. He was afraid to go by himself, afraid that, is it really an employer on the other end, or is ICE gonna be waiting for me there? And so we have a staff member who went with him. These are just the things that are unfolding. So when you hear, we're coming to get the worst of the worst, that is garbage, because what we're seeing is a constant erosion of people's protection who were lawfully here, who went through lots of vetting. And so that's the next step. And I hope that that is a red alert for everyone about what's happening out there.
And additionally, we're also seeing if you haven't been in this country for 5 years, you will receive no benefits. And if you did receive benefits, so if you received SNAP, if you received Social Security benefits, because for some folks, it takes a while before you can get your work permit, depending upon, this is the other thing. No one's negating that we have a broken immigration system. It doesn't work for everyone. It is tailored to the place where you come from in the world. And that doesn't work, because we've probably said 5 different terms that y'all never even heard of, right? Or what does that even mean? And it's difficult to navigate. But when we have people who are using the system right? Even folks who are lawfully coming here, and that they are in the system, but we keep changing the game in the middle. You know, how are you ever supposed to get ahead? So if you haven't been here for 5 years, you get no benefits. So first, let that sink in. And now what they're doing is, if you have gotten benefits, we have members of the community so you get a sponsor, right? Like my parents, when they came as political refugees from Cuba. My great aunt sponsored them. She sponsored my mom, my dad, my 2 sisters, my aunt, my uncle, my 2 cousins, along with other family members, right? Those people who are sponsors, who are essentially saying, I am responsible for you, are now getting letters in the mail that says, hi, you owe the federal government $20,000 and you have to pay it in the next 90 days. This was a lawful, again, if we want to talk about the law, right? These were people who did everything the right way. They had a family member who was here, who was working, who is now getting a bill because they did exactly what we asked them to do.
I mean, that raises a really important point, which is that when elected officials and when our president campaign on this issue, they campaign against what they call illegal immigration, right? But this is actually not about, are you here legally or illegally? Because there are vast numbers of people who are here legally who are still being targeted. Like Lourdes is saying, and the Trump administration's entire intent is to take people who are here legally and illegalize them, right? That's what they're doing with TPS. That's why if they can end status in one fell swoop for hundreds of thousands of people, and keep in mind, these are all people who have applied and their addresses are with the government, right? The government knows exactly where they live. If they can, in one fell swoop, end legal status for millions of people, not just TPS, but people who applied under parole, like Sophia was referencing the parole program that allowed people from certain countries to come in if they had a sponsor. And there were over 1 million people came in that way. You know, people from Afghanistan, people from Ukraine were paroled in. But all of these people that have availed themselves of lawful pathways and come in and followed all of the rules and gave the government all of their information and did their fingerprints and all of that, they are now being illegalized en masse so that the administration can meet its 3,000 arrests per day quota that it has decided that it needs to do, right? And so it's all kind of in service of trying to kick out as many immigrants as possible, because fundamentally it's about no immigration, not about ending illegal immigration.
And adding additional, just real quick, just adding additional things, layers, quick things. Not owning property here in the state of Ohio, if you're from specific countries, that is a policy that's being presented at the State House. At the federal level, removing birthright citizenship. I am a recipient of birthright citizenship. I was born during the time before my parents became citizens, right? So all of these strategies is, to the point that Emily is making, it is about villainizing, it is about illegalizing people that, again, have followed the process, people who have been here for years, for decades. So we have to pay attention, because all of it is aligned, both, and in a place like Ohio, you're seeing it from the federal level, but we're also seeing our state house is putting out wild policies every day, wild policies. And unlike the Columbus City Council, they're not holding any town hall meetings to see how y'all feel about it. They are holding meetings in the middle of the night. They're holding meetings at all kinds of times. They're not even public noticing what it is and voting on it and pushing it through.
I could never have imagined that last week I would spend with my colleagues trying to get the word out to every vulnerable family that doesn't have a green card yet, to know their rights, not to open the door if ICE comes. I mean, think about that. We're scaring people into realistically trying to help them protect themselves. People are afraid to leave their homes. That's what this has come to.
Okay, on that note, thank you all so much. It's CMC's longstanding tradition that we take audience questions as well. So we're going to move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences. So if you have a question for our panelists, now's the time to line up. Head to the microphone behind Doug. And for those joining us on YouTube, just drop your questions in the chat. We're keeping an eye on them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Danae, thank you so much. Thank you so much to today's panelists for a great conversation. If you do have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here. We'll try to get to as many of those questions, of your questions, as we can today. If you're watching online, type those questions into the chat. We'll try to get to some of those too. Great questions at CMC always have a couple of things in common. They can be asked in just a few seconds, and they always end with a certain punctuation mark. What punctuation mark does a question end with? They end with question marks. Yes, they do. It's always good to remind ourselves of that. I'm going to start us off with this one. Cindy Peters points out that Springfield, Ohio only has 17 registered foster families. What would action items be for February 3rd when there could be hundreds or potentially thousands of children left behind? What might be some action items that families or residents could take?
I mean, we have organizations like CASA, which I'm going to forget what these are court-appointed trustees of people. I mean, what we will see, right, is unless your family is, your family member is detained and families don't have a plan, which is something that we talk to our families. I know both at CRIS, I know we have a ton of organizations that are here today. We always ask families to have a plan just in case the head of household is taken. What you will see many times is that people will leave with their children, unless their children are older and they can entrust them with people who are here. But that is another point. We're not ready for that. We're not ready for if we saw this during Operation Buckeye when we had over 200 some people who were detained, right? We saw what that does to the system. This is just another vulnerable point that we have, that if families don't have a plan or they don't have their affairs in order, then we're not ready. We're not.
A really good resource that I would recommend to any Ohio families facing this is called Preparing Your Families for Immigration Enforcement. You can find it online. It's available in something like 10 languages. It's put out by Advocates for Basic Legal Equality, a local nonprofit, and they have a lot of great resources on kind of this is what you need to do. Get your kid's U.S. passport, figure out how to do a power of attorney, like all of these sorts of things. Have a safety plan, have backup contacts for the school, all of that. So I'd recommend people look at that as well.
As a quick follow-up to that, sorry, this might get to what you're going to say, but any quick tips for how people who are not affected by this can help families and immigrants in our community as well?
I mean, I will say this. I'm going to say it for Angie, and I'm going to say it for our other immigrant-serving organizations. There's two big things you can do. First of all, you know who gets cut federal funding right now, who's getting cut? Anybody who's serving immigrants and refugees, right? So you can give of your time, your talent, your treasure. We saw during Operation Buckeye, our helpers and other organizations like CRIS were delivering food to families during the holidays who were afraid to leave. They needed drivers, they needed volunteers. During crisis moments, we had volunteers that were walking kids to the bus stop, staying with them at the bus stop to ensure that they safely got, because we had ICE outside of some of our school buildings, right? These are ways I would highly suggest to get in touch with your local immigrant-serving organizations. Give, even if it's $5, $10, if we all gave just a little bit, because right now they are meeting critical needs for families like rental assistance, like putting food on the table, things that when people are extracted from their homes, breadwinners, that we can fill that gap for them. And then secondly, we're going to need bodies. We're going to need bodies at a time when if we see something else like that Blitz team that ran Operation Buckeye come back in, we need people who are willing to, who feel safe to do basic things for families that need it, like ensuring that our kids get to the bus stop safely and ensuring that bellies get fed.
In the Haitian community, I have been going around to churches and to speak with the congregation about they should have a list, a bucket list in the backpack of their children with the name of a family member, someone that they trust in the community, their personal information, the children's personal information, so that way if they're captured by ICE, so the kids are not being sent somewhere else that they don't know, they should have a familiar faces. So they are educated about putting the name of the child and then any medication that the children is taking, even their own medications in case they are captured by ICE, and also phone numbers, and so that if someone take them and their children, is not being sent somewhere else, so a family member they can call a family member, so the person can go over wherever the child is, so can pick up that child, and they can keep that child in their home so they can be safe.
Thank you to the panel. My name is Dan Ramos. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Ohio Education Association. Councilwoman, you mentioned the State House. It's something I'm familiar with and deal with often. Wanted to zoom out to, we were talking a lot about the federal level and impact on our local communities. But there are several bills currently before, in particular, the Ohio House of Representatives, House Bill 42, which is a data collection bill, and then Senate Bill 172, which is almost an enforcement expansion bill. One of the things that obviously we're chiefly concerned with is the Plyler rights of all students. Ohio serves about 1.6 million students, public schools do, and that's everybody from a U.S. citizen, a naturalized citizen, to a migrant, just regardless of status. What do you see if the passage of these two bills, 42 and 172, this is for the full panel, what do you see the outlay in Ohio for, one, Plyler rights of students, and then two, for our migrant communities if those bills are signed into law? Thank you.
Well, specifically, just so we know, those bills would essentially compel hospitals and schools to report if you have students that are undocumented or if you're treating patients that are undocumented. So it literally compels them to call ICE to come and get those students. I just want that to sink in for just a second. Those effects are detrimental, right? I think right now, as a community, we are playing chess, not checkers. We are having quiet conversations. This is like what I imagine we did during the civil rights movement when we were having underground conversations about how do we move as a city. And the good thing is that, ironically, the federal government doesn't know its own laws. So we have that in our favor many times, right? Because a lot of time what we saw was the executive orders that were coming down from the Trump administration were in direct conflict with our laws. And we're seeing that we're fighting back as a community. I think we have home rule here. We put out, our Mayor Ginther, put out an executive order since the first Trump administration that we will use no city resources. We will use no city resources strictly for the enforcement of citizenship, right? So we are not working with ICE. We are not, because we don't have to. That is their job. We're not going to do your job for you. And so we will continue to look at those ways that the law is on our side, that we can go back, that we can sue, that we can work with our other communities like Cleveland, like Cincinnati, like Akron, like Dayton, like Springfield, to bring court cases so that we can at least stop those things to figure out what makes the most sense. But these things that are coming fast and furious, and folks need to pay attention.
I would have to look, Dan, at the language a little bit more specifically, and would be happy to follow up with you afterwards. But I do think, it's important to keep in mind that, districts don't have to collect the status of a student. And so if they don't have the information, they can't share it with ICE. And my understanding, I'm only familiar with Columbus City Schools because that's where my kids go, and I, have helped a lot of clients register and so on. But my understanding is that they don't ask about that. There are ways around some of the ID requirements that are required when you enroll in school that they have implemented to help undocumented students, but they don't have to collect their status.
Hello, I actually work for Columbus City Schools. I'm an ESL teacher. My name is Lauren, and everything that was said today was information that I already knew and have taken to heart. As just an ordinary citizen who is totally appalled and freaked out and making parallels to what happened during the Holocaust. I mean, I have spoken with family members, and so my question is for the lawyers on the panel. In 2 weeks, people that I hold close to my heart are going to become illegal. They did not come here illegally. As I told the people at my table, they didn't cross the desert or cross a river and sneak across the border. They were invited to come. They came on a plane. They are Haitian. And they text me every day and ask me to pray for them. They're devout Christians. They're a member of our Christian population. And they cannot go back. They, like you had said, their home was taken by gangs and they were forced to leave at gunpoint. I asked about taking the money and flying back, and they said, as soon as we step off the plane, we'll probably be killed, and that $1,000 will go to the gangs. So that's also unacceptable. It's not a solution. It's actually quite stupid. But can people, yes, my question, I apologize. Can ordinary citizens take people into their homes as a way of helping them after February 3rd? Or is that going to be a violation of the law, and then our jobs and our families will also come under scrutiny and attack? So, the lawyers on the panel.
Lauren, first, I want to thank you for being an ESL teacher. And you're meeting people firsthand, and I know it's really painful what we're all going through. We had conversations at our office this week about a spectrum of risk that people might be willing to take. You know, what risk I might have taken when my kids were little and I had those responsibilities. And I think my employer's pretty understanding. If I were to get arrested at a protest, I'd be all right. But other people have to decide for themselves. Like our staff, we have a lot of people not born here, many citizens that it really pains me to have to tell you need to carry proof of your citizenship with you right now. So it's a spectrum of risk. What you're alluding to, I think, is concerns about harboring, that if you have someone in your home, and that is a serious issue you should look into and consider before doing that. But it's your spectrum of risk. Just know what you're getting into when you do it. We've been talking about driving people around. You know, is there a challenge with that? The one positive note, the judge in the litigation for the TPS case has promised to rule before February 3rd. I don't want to get hopes up improperly because it may be that just kicks the can down the road for 6 months. But we'll all be watching carefully to see when that decision comes out and what impact it has.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the judge she seemed in the hearing that she had, she did seem inclined to grant the injunction against the end of TPS, but I will just remind people that the same thing happened in the Venezuela TPS termination where they granted the injunction, the district court granted the injunction. It went up all the way to the Supreme Court in the shadow docket, which is where they issue these one paragraph opinions with no reasoning. And the Supreme Court lifted that injunction. And so then the termination of Venezuela TPS did go into effect. So I think Angie's probably right that it might just kick the can down the road a few months, even if it gets stopped on February 3rd, which I think it likely would get stopped on February 3rd.
I know where you need to end. I just want to say one thing. Our laws have not always been just, and it has always been but for the people that change happens. And we have seen that throughout American history. And when you are talking about comparing things, what's happening right now, to things like the Holocaust, right? Our laws are not always just. They're not always on the side of the people. There was segregation at one time in this country, and I think that we can all agree that was not just. So I just want to say to let that sink in. When you think about the personal cost, when you think about what it means to stand up for people, for communities, and for humanity.
Everyone, I really wish we had more time. I feel like we could talk for hours about this, but I'm getting the wrap-up signal from Doug, so I'm going to turn things over to Sophia Pfiffner for our closing remarks.
All right, well, I don't know about you, every week we have conversations here at the CMC. Last week we spoke about the state of Black men. The week before it was an update around the economy regionally and nationally. And every week there's a different mood in the audience. And I hope I'm not alone in this, but I sat there listening to today's discussion and the question of, is this the America that we live in? Is this the country that we want? And I thought about the role that organizations like the Columbus Metropolitan Club and the organizations that you represent play in creating civil society. And I hope that from today's discussion that you will reach out to your neighbors, you will reach out to a stranger in a street and see them as human, see their whole lived experience. I'm the daughter of immigrants who also benefited from birthright citizenship. My daughter, a couple weeks ago, as she was watching the news, asked, will they take me away? This has a real impact on so many Central Ohioans, and the only speck of hope that I have is, as you said, Lourdes, but for the people. We all have a role in playing and creating the type of environment and community that we want to live in. And I hope that from today's conversation that you took a speck of joy, an opportunity to look up and go, here's what I can do in creating the type of America, the type of neighborhood that you want to live in. So I'm so thankful that the CMC provides opportunities to have conversations like this. I want to thank Columbus City Council for supporting this conversation, as well as Downtown Columbus Incorporated. I want to thank the sponsors of our live stream for connecting to all the people who asked questions online, and I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to all of them. But the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, as well as our live stream and promotional partner, the Columbus Dispatch, for all of the work that you do here in Central Ohio. I'm incredibly grateful to the National Veteran and Memorial Museum for giving us a space to gather as a community and have conversations like this, civil discourse. And I want to thank all of our panelists today for your insight and your leadership and everything that you do to support every individual who lives here in Central Ohio. So Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, Emily Brown, Sophia Pierrelus, Angela Plummer, and our host, Danae King, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Let's give them all a round of applause. All right, so every week is different at the Columbus Metropolitan Club, and if you want to continue exploring today's topic, we do partner with the Columbus Metropolitan Library. They recommended that you check out Raiding the Heartland, an American story of deportation and resistance. You know, civic participation, civil society starts with action, with people, but also with education. So share this forum with your neighbors, with your coworkers, continue to check out the book from the library, and also make plans to join us next week, Wednesday, right here. We're hosting a conversation, Life After Cars, Reimagining Cities and People, featuring best-selling authors Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon to talk about transportation and what that looks like here in Central Ohio. Thank you so much for being here and supporting today's discussion. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.